cards, tokens, meeples, dice, minis, these are all things you can find inside of board game boxes. These are all amazing things that bring joy to so many people. I love opening a board game box and pulling out all those components and getting ready to play for a game night. But these pieces can complicate things. They can make it harder to bring those games out that you love. So today, let's talk about some solutions to organizing the chaos that comes with some board games. Welcome to my channel, my name's Chance, and today I'm going to be talking about board game inserts. So inserts are something where lots of board games come with them. Some come with inserts that aren't so great, some come with functional and serviceable inserts, and others you might want to find a replacement or a new solution for. That's going to be a lot of what this video covers. Now, I'm going to cover some of the more expensive third-party options, and I'll talk to you about, or explain to you how I choose my inserts and what games get inserts. Then, at the end of the video, I'm going to give you some recommendations for, let's say, some cheaper solutions. Feel free to skip ahead there if you want. Chapter markers down below, you know, it's your choice. But with that being said, let's dive into the beginning of this topic, which is going to be the manufacturer or the publisher insert. So I can't give publishers and manufacturers too hard of a time because these inserts have to serve two purposes. The primary purpose is just to survive transit. Like, they are shipping these games by freight across the world, and I don't know if you've watched any of those videos of freight ships crossing like the North Sea or whatever, but they're rocketing up in the air like vertical and smashing back down. Personally, I'm amazed that these games arrive in one piece at all. So that is really the primary goal of a publisher, just making sure that game survives, gets to the person that has ordered it, and they don't need to order replacement parts or the box isn't broken or whatever, right? Now, they also have a secondary purpose. That is to try to make the insert somewhat functional for the end user. And this can't take priority over survivability, which means that usability sometimes is a bit lacking. Sometimes it feels not very well thought out. And there's lots of games that will meet this category. First up, let's talk, there's two main categories of inserts I see for manufacturers. The first one's going to be the basic one. It's just the cardboard dividers. Lots of small box games like Resist will use a cardboard divider. This just gives you some separate component or separate areas for the different cards that you're using. Generally, these games don't have a ton of components. Or something like Wandering Towers. This is a bigger box that uses cardboard dividers for each one of its little individual tower pieces. And these are entirely, like, they're functional occasionally. But the benefit of these cardboard dividers is that if they don't serve their purpose for you when they arrive, these are super easy to recycle. Like, I never feel bad about taking out a cardboard divider and tossing it. There's one, like, I think I have the game The King is Dead, and this game came in a box that's way too big for what it has because it had like a tiny deck of cards and the box size was like 8 times bigger than that deck of cards. And it came with this cardboard divider that took up all the box space. Just chuck that cardboard divider basically right away. So I think that's actually an advantage of these cardboard dividers, is that once they serve their purpose, once the game arrives at your doorstep, that cardboard divider has done its job, and you can get rid of it if it doesn't actually make the game easier to set up and play. Next up is the one that I find always causes me a little more stress about throwing away or trying to recycle or something. These are going to be the plastic inserts. So games with plastic inserts are sometimes useful, but a lot of times not. Some examples of this are like Moon Colony Bloodbath. This is a recent game that I got that comes with one of those plastic inserts. It has some wells for the cards, has wells for tokens, but it doesn't have enough wells for all the tokens, so you have to like mix them, and it is completely useless. I need to use baggies anyways, so I don't really understand why there's an insert at all, because I just have to put everything in baggies. So that insert is kind of, it's non-functional. The game survived transit, but now I just chuck the insert because it just doesn't work for the game at all. There are other times, like this happens a lot with these plastic inserts. Now, the other thing to watch out for with these plastic inserts, and this is going to be my one tip with making a manufacturer insert working for you, is that a lot of times when I see boxes on the shelf in their shrink wrap, now if that box in its shrink has a bit of lid lift, sometimes that can be a aesthetically not pleasing to people, so I think manufacturers try to avoid that lid lift on the shelf. And also, it's easier to pack those boxes in without lid lift. But when it has lid lift, to me, that indicates that the manufacturer has put thought into the fact that there's going to be likely the chipboard with all your little token pieces. Once those are taken out, that box will be flat. And that means that whatever insert they design will be flush against the lid of the box. Now, when I have a box that is flush with the bottom in the shrink wrap, I know that when I take that chipboard out to pop out those tokens, there's going to be a gap between that insert and the top of the box. Whenever there's a gap, that means that if you tilt the game, if you shake the game, whatever, that gap means that things are going to fall out and making the insert essentially useless. Now, one thing that I think I heard from Quinn's on one of his episodes back when he was on Shut Up and Sit Down was actually saving that chipboard, that punch board with all those tokens. Save that punch board, take the insert all the way out of the box, and throw all the empty punch board in the bottom of the box. This way that you can put the insert back in, and then when you put the lid on, that insert will be flush with the top of the box. I'll show you with a photo over here of EOS Island of Angels. This is one I haven't played yet, but I recently organized, and I saved the punch board, and with this one, I actually glued the punch board together. No specific reason, but thought it'd be easier for some reason. But yeah, take the insert all the way out, place the punch board in the bottom, then put the insert back in, and now everything sits nice and tight in the box. Now I don't have to worry about when I store it vertically about things falling out of the trays and out of the wells. So this is one of those cases where if the manufacturer's insert seems serviceable, but it seems like maybe there was a bit of a gap in there, remember to hold on to that punch board and see if you can make that a bit of a tighter fit. Now, there are some other things with a couple other examples of manufacturers, and I want to call out a win in my book, and this is going to be El Grande. So sometimes the publisher is just going to be like, look, having an insert, whatever we do is going to be pointless. Let's just make the pieces survive, and let's give them some baggies or something to go with it. Lost Ruins Varnac did this. Their box just came with all of the tokens and pieces, and they just gave you a bunch of Ziploc bags in there. They're like, yeah, we'll make the game cheaper this way, and you can get it organized if you want. Now, with El Grande, I love what the publisher did with this one because they got the pieces to survive, but they also just gave you some flat-packed tuck boxes. These tuck boxes they're just little card boxes with the player colors on them. So when you organize the game, you just throw the player components into its matching tuck box, and when you go to set it up, you just hand players the various color tuck boxes, and you're ready to go. Now, with El Grande, this is an example where now that the game has arrived, there's a ton of space in the box. Like, it's pretty empty in El Grande, but the game, it is no longer being shipped by freight. Like, I don't expect to ship El Grande by freight again. So the game no longer needs an organizer to serve that purpose of surviving crossing the North Sea or whatever, right? So after a game arrives at your doorstep, sometimes it's better just to say, you know what, this insert served its purpose. Now I'm just going to throw it in baggies or little boxes and be good to go. And we're going to come back to that later in the video. Last thing I want to touch on before talking about third-party inserts are going to be the GameTrayz. So Kickstarters and GameFound campaigns, a lot of times as a all-in pledge or something, or a deluxe pledge, the publisher will offer GameTrayz. They'll do a partnership with them and say, hey, we got GameTrayz for this all-in pledge. I'll admit that I used to be very excited about this partnership, but now I'm always hesitant. Like, I don't always know if that's going to be an improvement. Now, this isn't a knock on GameTrayz. I feel like they actually do good work. I've had good experiences with a lot of GameTrayz, and they have a challenging job to do. Like, their design is a hard thing to work with, especially working with the molded plastic, like with the restrictions on kind of how aggressive those angles can be with the molded plastic. Like, it is a challenging project. But there's been some misses. So I have Andromeda's Edge, the deluxe edition, and I absolutely hate these GameTrayz. I feel like Andromeda's Edge is already a pain to set up, and the GameTrayz make things even worse. Now they did some things where they tried to make it where you could take the game trays and like set them out on the table and set them on the board and like just have an improved, faster setup in some way. But I also hate having just those chunks of plastic on the board with no design on them or whatever. So to me, they look worse. They don't fit the aesthetic of the game, and I don't really like that as the solution. So in that situation, yeah, I was not happy. I've actually thought about getting rid of the game trays and just throwing things in baggies in Andromeda's Edge to make things a little easier to set up for me. But so that's kind of annoying. But as a win for GameTrayz, I do want to compliment them on the Endeavor Deep Sea insert. So I have the Endeavor Deep Sea Deluxe version, which they partner with GameTrayz for using a more renewable, recyclable material instead of the normal plastic one. So it's basically these cardboard trays, well, some kind of cardboard tray with just some sleeves, like some paper sleeves that go over them. I will mention that Dice Tower called out having a bit of a problem with pieces maybe falling out because the sleeve wasn't tight against there. I haven't had an issue with them at all. Like, to me, they're absolutely perfect, and I've had no issues with anything falling out of Endeavor Deep Sea, or out of the sleeves themselves inside the box. And I think this is a great organizer. I would love to see GameTrayz do more projects like this using that newer renewable material of theirs. Okay, so with that being said, with manufacturing inserts out of the way, let's talk about how we can upgrade these inserts or get rid of them or replace these inserts. The number one gold standard insert that I have for myself with my experience is going to be the laser cut wooden inserts. I absolutely love these things. So assembly is required, but they tend to be very thoughtfully designed. Like, I feel like the people creating these put a lot of work into making these functional, useful, quick for setup, and really logical storage solutions. So just the amount of work and thought put into these is very appreciated. And they also look great. Some of the places that you can order from will add little etched design patterns. They'll make fancy designs to match the game. So when they're out on the table, they have kind of that game aesthetic already built into them a little bit. The assembly, it's annoying. Usually to assemble these, I just get my little thing of wood glue. I'll get a mallet or a hammer and some rubber bands to hold things together while they dry. And I'll sit at the TV and build this on the coffee table. And yeah, just watch a movie or something like that. So overall, not a huge deal. But that can be a barrier for some people that just don't want to do that work. Now, there are a few brands that I lean on for these wood inserts. I think Tower Rex is probably the one I most purchase from. I really like Tower Rex. I get them from Etsy most of the time. I feel like I've used a few of them now, and now I kind of implicitly trust them on their designs. Like, I've had really good luck, and if I have a game that I'm like, this needs an insert, I'll usually go and check if Tower Rex has made one for it or not. Other ones that I've used are going to be Smonex. Smonex has made some nice ones. I think I had that for Westerns of Arnak, which I don't own anymore. And then I also had it for Gaia Project. They do some neat things with acrylic sometimes, and they kind of have that etched acrylic layer, or etched acrylic for labeling and stuff, which is really pretty. I've also have Laserox and the Broken Token, and I think GGG Lasers on Etsy. So lots of manufacturers out there for this, lots of independent creators out there with this. And overall, I don't think I've had a miss on any of them. Like, I've enjoyed all the ones I've gotten. Now, these are pricey. I'm not gonna lie, like, getting a wooden insert is a pricey upgrade for a board game. It's probably one of the more expensive upgrades you can do for your board game. And because of this, I have one primary requirement when I'm looking for an insert, or when I'm even considering an insert. That requirement is that it has to reduce setup time, because the whole point of this is to try to get this game to the table more. I don't care that it looks pretty. Well, it's nice that it looks pretty, but it has to be able to get this game out and get it played more. It has to reduce that barrier for people playing this game. So with that being said, I want to give two examples. One of them is going to be Scythe. I believe my Scythe insert, so I have the legendary box, whatever, like the big box for Scythe, and like all the stuff for it. So huge pain to have it all organized in like in the base box that it came with. But I now have the Broken Tokens organizer for Scythe. This keeps all my modules organized. It has the individual player trays for each player, and then also has two resource containers for both sides of the table. So this right here reduces setup time. Like I can hand the players their individual player trays and they're ready to go. I can take out those resource trays. I just set them on the table. Those are done. I don't need to organize anything already. I can take out the coin tray, set that on the table. That's done. So this is something where I really like it when a organizer is just kind of, you just take up the components, put it on the table, and you're ready to go. You don't need to organize anything. You don't need to get trays for anything. Everything is just set up and ready out of the box. So that's something I really appreciate about my scythe organizer. Next up, I want to mention my Gaia project one. So Gaia project, one of the pains of Gaia project is organizing your technology tiles. So with my organizer, it actually has a technology tray. So at the beginning of the game, I can just take out this technology tray, set it on the table, technologies are organized, we are ready to start the game, basically. That's really the part that I struggled with the most with this one, was getting that set up. Now, it also has the individual player component, like it has containers for those. So once players choose their colors, I can just hand them their component trays and they just need to dump out their own components and set up their own trays. It's really good while I'm getting other things set up to have players that give them something they can do, basically. So I like keeping other players busy while I'm getting things set up. So a lot of these times, these organizers, by being able to hand out these individual components, maybe hand someone a deck of cards to shuffle, they can speed up my setup time, and they can also kind of keep players from getting bored during the setup, right? So that's my first primary need for an organizer. Is it a game that I'm struggling to get to the table because it's hard to set up? I have things to organize. I have things that need to be sorted before we play. Anytime something like that happens, I am going to go out and search for a possible solution with an insert. Now, a secondary requirement for me, or a secondary need, is going to be one that can combine expansions or modules. So I already mentioned Scythe, combining the modules for that one, which is phenomenal, having the big box and combining all the modules there. But the one I want to focus on here is going to be Wingspan. So for Wingspan, I have both the Europe expansion and Oceania. And I'll admit that before I bought an insert for this, it was a bit of a pain. Having the multiple boxes for the game, I couldn't fit all the cards in the same box, or if I tried to, I'd have to fit other things in another box. And it was getting harder to bring Wingspan out. Now, Wingspan is not a heavy game, so it was one that I felt like the effort was no longer really worth it getting it to the table, right? Now I have an organizer. I believe mine's from Tower Rex, and first up, comes with a beautiful dice tower, so it replaces the cardboard one with the wooden laser cut one. Absolutely love it. But it also comes with all the things that I require in an organizer, like the separate resource trays, the holders for the player components and stuff. And it comes with a card holder that fits all the expansion cards in it. So I can basically fit everything I want in the base box of Wingspan. The only thing I can't fit, it doesn't fit I can't have both the boards for Oceania and the base game. So Oceania replaces the base player boards. And that's okay with me, because like my default setup for Wingspan these days is with Oceania. Like I'm never playing Wingspan, my version of Wingspan, without Oceania. So like I don't need the baseboards anymore. So the organizer I have fits my needs perfectly, makes the game easier to bring back to the table, makes it even quicker to set up. Like I actually really, and then some of the little thoughtful details that go into these wooden inserts, like the card holder for Wingspan has slots in the top to put your cards up on display. So those little things I really like in these wooden inserts. Now, the last thing that I like for these wooden inserts, and this is kind of just a default, but it is something I watch out for, is usefulness during play. So is the insert going to provide some sort of benefit during play? And once again, I call out Scythe and all of these this time. I feel like the Scythe organizer, they just did a really good job with. I do like the fact that it came with 2 resource trays, because that way I can set one at each end of the table. I think that's just a phenomenal touch in Scythe. Other things are, like I have one for Flamecraft. Flamecraft, I don't know if I needed the insert, but it is nice. I do like that it has the coin box, and then it also has the resource tray, which actually has a rounded bottom on it, so it's pretty easy to get those resources out of there. I find that sometimes putting things in like a square box can be hard to pick those components out. So I do like it when the designer puts some thought into kind of the fact that, okay, if you're constantly taking resources out of this and putting them back, like having that rounded edge on there helps with just making it a smoother transaction for you during the game. Now, I do want to give one shout out to a designer or a Etsy shop that I haven't mentioned in the earlier ones, and that's going to be LUGU. It's a LUGU shop on Etsy. And this is because they have made the best insert I have ever used. I bought the insert for Oathsworn from this shop, and it is just mind-blowingly phenomenal. So Oathsworn is it's a big game. It's hard to get out because it takes a lot to set up. So before I got the organizer, Oathsworn just was not hitting my table because it took a lot of work to get the game out, to get the components I wanted, to get things sorted and organized. And even playing the game was kind of, there were friction points that were just making it a little less pleasant to play. And now buying this organizer has completely changed my experience with Oathsworn. It has made it easier. I played a lot solo. It has made it a lot easier to get it out and made it a lot easier to put away. Made it a lot easier even during gameplay. So it kind of checked all my boxes on this one. And first up, looks beautiful. Like it has etched in the player trays. It etched in some art, and if you put them all together, you get a whole picture of the Oathsworn art on those player trays. And then these player trays, they have lids, so you just take the lid off, and then you're ready to go with your player dashboard, basically. It has the acrylic overlays to keep all the pieces in place, so you basically, once you take that lid off, you are all set for the game, basically. The other one is the card organizer. So in the base box of Oathsworn, it came with kind of 4 separate organizers, and it was kind of a pain finding things because it didn't have enough dividers to be able to search things out. So it was a challenge to move between chapters in the game. Now with this one, the card organizers, there's a ton of space for the cards, and I have dividers between each chapter. So it's really easy just to be done with the chapter, put the cards away, get the next chapter out, and get going. Then the next thing is some of the quick setup components in this. So there's a quick setup card box where it's just the smaller card box, and I can just take that out, set it on my table. It has all my free company stuff, has all my current chapter stuff, has all my items right now, or that I've obtained. So it's just this thing that it was really well thought out, that it's like, okay, you have only a subset of the cards that you need at any given time, so I'll just make a box that stores those ones that you need during the game. There's going to be the quick setup city box as well. So there was during the city phase, during the story phase, there was stuff you had to do where finding like your event tokens, which would be numbered like 1 to 25, and you'd have to find like number 6, and you'd be hunting through all the tokens trying to find it, and it was a friction point. And now with this organizer, I just have a tray I flip down, and I'm ready to go for the city phase, which is phenomenal. And then the other thing that was built into this was one of the trays that holds the dice is also a dice tray. So like I take things out of the box, and then I also have my rolling area already set up for combat. So yeah, big shout out to LUGU Shop on Etsy. Absolutely love their work with Oathsworn, and I'm excited to see more organizers from them. All right, so moving on from the wooden inserts, because the wooden inserts are pricey, so what other options do we have? The next up I have is the foam core insert. So you might be familiar with this with folded space. Folded space is a popular one. In general, I think these are really good. And this is a cheaper option than the wooden ones, and they're still easy to assemble. You still have to do the work to assemble them though, so like gluing them together and everything. But they don't look as nice. I mean, the base ones are just going to be the gray foam core stuff. They do some partnerships with companies. So like they did one with Restoration Games with Thunder Road, Vendetta, Maximum Chrome Edition. You could get the folded space insert. And this partnership, they added art to the actual foam core pieces. So the art matches the aesthetic of the game. So when you have them out on the table, it actually matches the theme and feel of the game, which I think is really nice, because sometimes having a hunk of plastic or a hunk of wood in a game that, like Gaia Project, I would say that the wood doesn't really match the theme of the science fiction stuff. But with this one, with the art on the folded space one and the Thunder Road Vendetta, it all blends together on the table and all looks great. So I do appreciate when we get that tie-in with the art of the insert with the actual game itself. Overall, folded space, I think they make very functional and cheaper inserts. Now, I do still watch out for those things because I have seen some that I haven't been too impressed with in folded space. I do like to make sure that if you that there's separate trays for the player components. Like I want to make sure that I can always hand individual players just a box or whatever of their things. I don't want to have to separate those during the game. Or there's some that I've seen where I have to like hold over part of the box and then dump out one player's components, hold over the other part of the top of the box, dump out another player. That's super inconvenient. But and then also I find that some of their resource containers aren't the best because they're very square. So they don't do some of the fancy things with like the rounded bottoms and stuff. So resources can be a little more challenging to get out of some of the boxes just because the square boxes have no way to easily pull resources out of. So a little less functional during gameplay, but overall I think Folded Space does a good job with their inserts. So lastly, for these custom inserts, I want to talk about the 3D printed inserts. These are pretty popular, especially on Etsy, but I'll admit that I'm mentioning these last because I'm not crazy about the 3D printed inserts. They're very heavy. They make your game a lot heavier. And then also they can be pretty sharp. Like the edges on them are actually, they're mildly dangerous. You might want to get a file and kind of take the edge off some of those. But I will mention that I do have a 3D printed insert for Ark Nova, and I do really like it. Like I think it was Printables by Karen on Etsy. And this has made Ark Nova easier to manage for me. It has spaces for all the cards, of course, and then it has these cool trays for the actual habitat buildings, and then some other cool trays for the specialized buildings. So I don't do as much hunting for each one of the tokens or tiles as I am putting things on my board, which is really nice. And then this insert also had extra space in it because there was extra space in the box. So I ended up getting some upgrades for Ark Nova, like some 3D printed pavilions and stuff. And there was enough space in this insert where I could just toss those in the box and everything. So I didn't have to have a separate container for those, which was really nice. Now, the only thing I didn't like about this 3D printed insert was the player boards had a little too much granularity to them. Like they could hold the cubes in their individual little cube spots and your associate workers in their individual associate spots, but these were a pain to use. It's a pain to try to put individual cubes in the little cube slots and your associates in those individual slots. Like it was too granular, and it made setting up and storing, like even during storage, like if the box lid wasn't tight enough, all those cubes would fall out and it was pointless putting there anyways. So I don't really use that part. I just throw all the player components in the plastic baggie and they fit in the bottom of the box just fine. There's an extra space for those. But that is something I'm calling out because it's something I watch out for with inserts, is like if the insert has too much granularity, it might not actually improve your setup experience. It might actually not improve your setup experience, and it might actually detract from your takedown experience because it could just take you forever to get those components back in their individual slots and stuff. So that's just something to watch out for all inserts, is that kind of granularity component. Because I find that things with buckets, it's just easier. You just take whatever you're throwing in that bucket and toss it in at the end of the game and you're good to go. Now, next up, with that being said, like I said, I really like the wooden inserts. I love having those for some of my games. And the foam insert's also great. And then even when, like that 3D print insert, it's improved my experience with Ark Nova. So inserts overall, they get 2 thumbs up for me. I'm all for inserts. But do all games benefit from inserts? This is no. They just don't. Not all games benefit from inserts. So remember, I have 3 requirements that I'm looking for inserts. The number one, and this is if the insert does not meet this first requirement, it to me is pointless to purchase. It has to reduce setup time, and ideally reduce teardown time. But less critical, number one is that it just has to make the game easier to get to the table. Number 2 is combining expansions or organizing modules, so kind of making multiple components of the game easier to organize and manage. Then the final thing is, this is not, I wouldn't say this is a hard requirement, but it is something I watch out for, and that's just to be useful on the table. Like the organizing components have to be somewhat useful on the table. Ideally, I just take things out of the box, set them on the table, and we're good to go. So one game that I'll mention that I bought an insert for that I find completely pointless is Inish. Now, the insert is beautiful for Inish. Like there's some neat laser engraved designs with like Celtic dots and stuff. It even has like some dimensionality to the player boxes, and it is really nice. It works as an insert, like it works perfectly fine. But it was totally pointless. It wasn't necessary. I could have thrown things in baggies. I could have put the player pieces in baggies. I could have thrown the cards in baggies. There was really no, it did not save me setup time by getting this insert. It did not meet that first requirement. And I bought this one back when I was getting excited about these inserts, and I was like, oh, I really like Inish, so I'm going to get an insert for it, because I was like, all games that I like, I need to upgrade somehow. But I definitely regret upgrading Inish, because the insert has not saved me time. It does not help me on the table in any way. It does not combine expansions all that effectively. So this is a case where, yeah, I went over the top here with my Inish insert. And I would say this is surprisingly true for a lot of mini-base games. Now, sometimes baggies are just going to be better than an insert. I'm going to call out CMON on this one. So Cool Mini or not, they publish a lot of games with, well, minis. I mean, that's in their name, right? So I have Ankh, Blood Rage, Dune, War for Arrakis, and all these have minis. Now let's focus on Dune, War for Arrakis. This game comes with a insert that has the molded plastic trays for those minis. Now, I completely understand why this exists. This is there, like I said, for these minis to survive transit. They are going to be some of the more sensitive components in the game. They need to have their safe structure to make it across the ocean. And these plastic trays do that. They keep everything separated. They keep things from hitting each other, from breaking when they're jostling around. But setting up the game, already a pain. Like, you gotta give someone, like, put out the trays on the table and be like, hey, take your player color or whatever. Like, take all the pieces of your player color. Takes a while to do that. But that's not even my complaint. My complaint is tear down at the end of the game. This is where if you did not take a photo of those mini trays, or if you did not do some sort of marking on those mini trays before you set up that game, it is near impossible to figure out where those minis go. Okay, it's not impossible, but it just takes forever, and I get very frustrated. Maybe I just lack patience. But figuring out where those minis go back into that tray is just terrible. And this is where I say, with Dune War for Arrakis, that insert has served its purpose. The game survived its ocean voyage. I do not need to be beholden to what CMON has given me. I can now do what I want with the game. So I've removed those inserts, and I've thrown the player components in plastic baggies. All the minis go in a plastic bag. Guess what? They're pretty hardy. They're not going to just break randomly. Now, if I'm throwing the box around, maybe that's going to be a risk. But overall, I think I'm going to be pretty safe with them in a bag. They've been doing well for the last 2 months in there and taken the game a few places now. So this is one of those cases where, yeah, like those plastic inserts, I don't need an insert for the game. I don't think an insert for the game is going to help me in any way, but just getting these things separated out in those plastic baggies is totally great. Same thing with Ankh. So Ankh, I took the individual player components, threw in plastic bags, but I did keep one of the insert components. So like the insert for the large miniatures, so CMON does a lot of these big miniatures, and I kept that insert for those big ones because they are going to be a little more susceptible to damage. And I just keep the one for the big one, put that in the bottom box, and then do baggies for everything else on top of that insert piece. Once again, Blood Rage is the other one I'll call out. All the player components I have in plastic baggies, and then the monsters, the big monsters, I keep in the original storage container. Because once again, those are a little easier to put away. The inserts are relatively easy to find where those go, and it keeps those nice big minis nice and protected by keeping those original inserts. Now, there's also the case where maybe those baggies aren't the best solution. So there's a couple upgrades you can actually do to let's say, a baggie-based solution. And this is going to be getting yourself some kind of aftermarket token trays or containers, or these card or tuck boxes. So I actually have gotten to the point where I order some of these on kind of like bulk, you know? I order card boxes from Amazon. I order some of these token containers on Amazon, and I just keep them around. So when I get a new game, I can kind of just use them instead of plastic baggies. The benefit these have are that, especially with resource management games, you can just throw the resources in these token trays, and then once you're ready to set up, you just take these token boxes out and you set them on the table, and kind of like an insert, you're ready to go. See, with plastic baggies, when you're doing those resources, usually you're just taking those baggies and you're dumping them out on the table and trying to keep them in their little individual piles. Not the best, especially at the end of the night when you have to sort them all again, pick them all up, try to funnel them back into that baggie. So this is where those token containers can they serve the purpose of the insert. They keep things organized in the box, and they also make it quicker to set up and then quicker to tear down at the end of the night. So I've done this with Manhattan Project Energy Empire. I use the token trays for this one. I just have multiple of them. I can just take them out, sit on the table, and we're good to go. And then for the cards, I even have a tuck box for the cards in that game. That keeps the game cards a little more protected than just in a plastic baggie. Same thing with the game Brew. Like, it's another small resource management game. It has a few resources that need to be managed, so I take the token trays, throw them in there, and there's plenty of room in the box. I don't need an insert for it because I don't need that much organization. And once again, I reduce the setup time and teardown time by having those in the trays that are just going to be on the table. So I think that having those card boxes and token boxes that's a great solution for a lot of games out there. This mostly works in games that have enough space in the box, like there's enough empty space in the box so you can kind of just choose whatever trays you want and throw them in there. The other solution that I have a friend that does, and I actually think is kind of genius, is to just have a stack of like token trays. He uses like these little, I don't know, they're like the little ketchup tins or whatever you can get at restaurants. And he just has a stack of those of like 8 or 10 or whatever. And if he has a game that he has baggied in Ziploc bags, he'll just bring out those little containers, put them on the table, dump the Ziploc bags into each one of those containers, and good to go. That's another fantastic solution. I really think that's a way that you can just make that work with any of your games. You don't need to have the individual token containers and have those sorted in your games. Then finally, I'll call out one more solution. This is kind of in between having kind of like those token containers and the card tuck boxes and an actual insert. I believe it's Game Silo has made some of these kind of plastic boxes that store individual trays in there. And you can have a lid on that plastic box, and then you can kind of separate out all your components into those different trays. They even make they're modular, so you can switch them out for different types of, or different size containers. You can have some for an actual deck of cards in there. So I think this is actually a really cool solution. I've used this in 2 of mine. A little more expensive, like these can be $20, $25 for those, so it's kind of nearing the point of just getting an insert. But I've used this for, I think, Lowlands, and I think I have it in Anachrony is another one I've used that for. And it's just another option that kind of gives you that between, you don't need to do all the assembly, you don't need to pay the extravagant price for an actual big insert, but you still get an improvement in your organization with your games. Okay, so that was a lot. That's what I have to say about inserts. Overall, remember that the manufacturer, they're doing what they can. They need to just make sure the game gets to you in one piece. It would be nice if the inserts were a little more thoughtfully designed, coming to you to your doorstep, but that can't always happen. So there are some solutions you can employ to kind of improve your experience with kind of that setup and teardown and maybe in playability of the game by searching out for third-party solutions. Now, I mentioned the wooden inserts, the laser cut ones are absolutely phenomenal, but we have the folded space ones and the 3D printed ones are both very functional. Folded space being kind of the cheaper, but still very functional end of kind of that custom 3D or custom insert solution. But of course, make sure that you are considering if that game you're playing needs an insert. Just because you like a game a lot doesn't mean it needs an insert. You probably want to consider, is this actually going to save me setup time? And one thing I didn't mention is maybe if you paint minis, maybe an insert is going to protect those painted minis. So figure out, will that insert serve its purpose for you? Because if it doesn't, and maybe the manufacturer's insert isn't serving its purpose either, maybe just get rid of it and use some plastic baggies and make your life a little easier. Or if you want to do that slight upgrade, go with one of those, game silo trays, or simply these little cheap plastic containers or card tuck boxes. So I hope this gave you some ideas for some of your games, and maybe even saved you some money and prevented you from buying that insert you maybe have in your Etsy cart right now. Or making you take a little bit of a harder look at whether or not that insert's necessary. Or if you haven't even heard of these things, maybe I gave you some ideas and some sellers to go and look at to help you with some of your bigger games and help you get those games to the table. Let me know if you have any other thoughts about this, or if you have some maybe manufacturers that I didn't consider in this that you think are doing a really good job making board game inserts. And as always, thank you for spending your time with me and watching this video. And the usual YouTube stuff, please like and subscribe.